Welcome to A Novel Talk. I'm Wendy Kendall, a cozy mystery author, middle grade mystery writer, and half of the duo bringing you our regular podcast series, talking with fascinating novelists who are writing across a variety of genres. And here's your co-host.
Thank you, Wendy. I'm Carl Lee. I write paranormal fantasy, and I'm very excited to have Pam Binder as our guest today.
Yes, join us today for a novel talk with Pam Binder, the award-winning New York Times and Amazon best-selling author based in suburban Seattle. Pam has 10 novels and 1 novella to her credit. Drawn to Celtic legends and anything Irish or Scottish, the prolific author blends historical events, characters, and myths into her young adult, romance, historical, time travel, and fantasy fiction. Among her distinguished honors is RT Book Review's 2018 Pioneers in Romance Award. Pam is a much sought-after conference speaker and teaches the year-long classes Write Your Story and also After the First Draft. She's also president of the Pacific Northwest Writers Association and the program director of its monthly meetings, workshops, and annual conference. And on a personal note, I will say for myself, and also on behalf of so many uncountable others, it's thanks to Pam that I've learned the skills, persistence, and joys of writing and of becoming an author. Pam's newest book, Christmas Night, is available for pre-order now for its November 6th launch. Welcome to A Novel Talk, Pam Binder. Pam, are you with us?
I am. I'm actually, Wendy, I was just blown away by that introduction. Thank you so much.
That's very sincere.
Like, oh my gosh. Thank you.
Thank you very
amazing.
Much. You're so amazing. And I know Carl gets the honor of the first question.
Yay!
Oh. Let me get the chocolate out.
Yes, please. So Pam, you write time travel novels, and time travel is kind of dangerous because you can fall into a trap of just fixing problems with time travel. How do you balance the allure of time travel, which is a very exciting concept, with against those dangers to present a story that is cohesive, where you don't necessarily go back and just time
and
travel
fix something?
Out of the problem.
Well, I actually have always loved the idea of someone from the 21st century now going back into a world where they kind of assumed the world was a certain way through books or through history novels and nonfiction, and then seeing it how it really was. But to answer your question about how you don't just time travel yourself out of the problem, I actually think that the problems get worse when you go back in time, because you can't, the rules that you kind of grew up around don't apply, and people are different than they are the way you're used to them. I'm very careful about not stepping on the butterflies and changing the world into a Jurassic Park. So I really don't have my characters ever go back and try to change history. It's basically a case where I want them to go back and learn more about themselves, because I put them into an uncomfortable position about having to navigate in a world that they're unfamiliar with. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I've always been fascinated with doing that. I even went to the point where I actually attended a lecture by Dr. Stephen Hawking on time travel, where he said that he actually felt that time travel was possible, and because it supported the physics, and he didn't think we had time travel, but he thought it was possible. And then for anyone who's ever talked to me for more than 30 seconds, I always say the most exciting moment of my life in meeting people was that I actually had an opportunity to talk to Dr. Stephen Hawking. So, and we actually chatted about time travel. So that was a lot of fun.
I have spoken to you for more than 30 minutes, and I have enjoyed hearing that story on more than one occasion.
I know. I love telling it.
Your new book, in the Matchmaker Cafe series, A Christmas Night,
yes,
available November 6th. Our listeners are in a wonderful romantic adventure. I love the name of the law firm of your protagonist, Madeline, works for, Murphy's Law. Was that a nod to the principle that everything that can go wrong will go wrong, and a precursor of things to come? I loved that.
Thank you so much. Yes. That's absolutely true. Thank you for noticing. It's really fun as an author because you do stuff like that, and if people catch it, good. If they don't, that's okay too. So it's every once in a while you slip things in like that as an author. So thanks for noticing.
I saw the little twinkle in your eye when I read the name the first time.
Cool. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. That's a lot of fun. Yeah, you just but I honestly can say that I've never put anyone in my novels that I was not happy with. I mean, I don't do that piece, but I will do Murphy's Law kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you don't believe me.
Well, Pam, I'm intrigued by your characters. They're all created with such a depth of emotion, and their motivations are so interesting. Can you talk a little bit about the 3 matchmakers in your series? And by the way, are you a matchmaker, and what is in you that is like a matchmaker?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. So I really like this idea where I think there's a little matchmaker in every one of us, that we want to make sure that everyone lives a happily ever after. I really believe that. And with the 3 matchmakers, I wanted them to be, I had this concept of 3, but the oldest one, Lady Rosalind, she's like the wise person, and then Bridget is more like she's more mature, but she's still kind of learning how to be the wise woman. And then Fiona is the young person. She's she is very impulsive. She acts before she speaks. Those kinds of things that I wanted, like the 3 stages of women, basically. And so I really wanted to embody them in the matchmakers. And then I actually introduced a new character into the story, into Christmas Night, that I was really excited about. I mean, just people, and this character actually embodies all 3 of these characteristics, but she is full on more whimsical. She actually is more in touch with all 3 characteristics. So I thought that was kind of fun. And as far as am I a matchmaker, my children have told me to stop it, so no. So I did start out, but they quickly informed me that they had it covered. So there we go.
Excellent. Speaking of the 3 matchmakers, they make a cute little family, and family seems to be a very important theme throughout this book. Does Colin run away as a child in search for something that he doesn't have at home?
Yes, he does, actually. And the thing that was fun to write about this is when I had him running away, he is in search of family. He is in search of connection. And it was in this particular time period in the Middle Ages, I don't think we are aware of it as much because we're so much about family in the 21st century. But children were really not as valued back then as they are now. But they still had the same needs. It was almost like they didn't know what was missing. And I wanted to kind of bring that out, because I think that even though in the 21st century we think that we're about family, I always wanted us to kind of it's like a touchstone, realizing that even someone who feels that they're independent, that feels that they're got it all together, that we all have those needs. And so he was running away. He was looking for more of a stronger connection to a family unit, rather than just assuming the role that was set out for him.
Well, he seems to have
take
found.
over.
Yeah, he seems to have found a couple of good ones in the book.
Yeah.
You can't have a romance without some form of betrayal. Do you think we're more often betrayed by our friends and families or by our enemies, and which and why?
So I actually think that we're more betrayed by our families than because with our enemies we actually see that coming, and I do think it's those who we are closest to. Those betrayals can hurt the deepest, and although I don't always like to go into the too much in the novels, I think that it's there. I think that it's one of those things that we all, from look at, because I think we get blindsided if someone we love, and sometimes it's a small betrayal with friends and family, and sometimes it's larger, but it's still there and it still hurts. And then how do you deal with it when that happens? Mm-hmm. I think is a, do you let it slide? Do you speak up? How do you confront that? And sometimes, and I try to deal with it in this particular case, because both my heroine and heroine both were in situations where the expectations that were foisted on them, that in some ways their parents and friends didn't feel like they were forcing on. They thought they had good intentions, supposedly. It just
Yes.
They just lost sight of what what the person really needed. And sometimes I think that's true too. Is that they're not. Sometimes our friends and families aren't doing it to be mean. They think it's in our best interest, but they're just not listening to us. And I think being listened to is really huge.
It just goes straight to the heart. It really does, as you're reading the book, too.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
In this new book, Christmas Night, your time traveler notes that human nature is not so different over time. Each century, people's wants and needs are driven by similar pressures and hopes. For example, people who are torn between duty and love. Can you talk a little bit about that struggle as a theme, and then also with your characters?
Thank you. So, yeah, I love that part, and I love the part that we look back on history and we think it was so different, and we think that people were different, and one of the examples, and I'll get to the other questions is that, and I set this deliberately in 1485, and where I said it, because Mallory's The Death of Arthur came out, and it was a romance. It was one of these Guinevere and Lancelot and King Arthur, and everybody thought, oh my gosh, you can be in love with someone. You don't necessarily have to be married to them. There is such a thing as love, and we, looking back, we think, oh my gosh, that's when, in the Middle Ages, that's when people discovered that they loved each other, and that was so silly. I mean, that people have always loved each other. There's always been, caring for your family and caring for each other. And I kind of wanted to highlight that, and particularly with the relationships that Colin had with his surrogate family, and that the struggles that his family dealt with, and he dealt with the same here. And the other piece that I was dealing with is that his family, the Romani, or Gypsies, I mean, they were ostracized, just in same ways as we still ostracize people now. And so we're still dealing with the same issues, We just rename them or dress them up in different costumes, so to speak. And so that's another thing that's really fun as an author, is that you get to highlight that. And I think one of the reasons I was attracted to history and to writing about history and time travel is to actually then show this 21st century person going into the past and realizing we're all struggling with the same things. We're still trying to get it right. We're still working on making it right, and it's incremental, and we still have work to do, but we're making progress. So it's I like that. I like to show the progress that we're making too, because I believe in happily ever after. I believe that we're making progress. Sometimes it's not as fast as we want, but we're making progress, and so I think it's fun, and I think we learn from our mistakes, and that's and like in both families, for both heroine and heroine, their families finally got it, and I like to be able to do that because I get to pick out ends.
You have the power.
I get to do that. I have the power. Right. Yeah, closet control freak. Yes. But
hey, Pam, you mentioned the time frame, and it's very clear that you are very fond of this in your treatment of the customs and the speech patterns and such. Was this an era that you studied before you started writing? Were you a history buff before you were a writer, or did you become a writer and decide that this is a historical time period that you wanted to focus on?
Well, I was a history major in college, but I became a history buff long before that. The first novel that got me really attached to history was a book called Forever Amber, and that was set in the 17th century, and it was during one of the plagues. And I remember, and the reason I ended up with that book is that my parents had just bought a house, and I know I've told you guys this story because it's really was very impressionable to me. And the person that they bought the house from left their library with all their books, and I was like in the 4th or 5th grade at the time. So I was a voracious reader. I started reading this book, and finished it. And it was about a prostitute in love with a captain who was married. It was very not appropriate for my age. And I don't remember that part so much as the rich history and how the plague devastated London, and the things that people went through, and their love of family and their commitment to each other just really struck me, even though this was in the 17th century, 17th, 18th century. And then the other piece that struck me is that my mother saw that I'd finished the book, and the only thing she said to me was, "Do you have any questions?" And that was so huge for me because she wasn't censoring what I was reading. And so from then on, I just became even more interested in reading and more interested in the past. And so history always intrigued me from that moment on.
You came to history through reading and writing through history. Yes. Excellent.
Yes, there we go.
You're so good at turning phrases. You have some great lines in this book. Examples. Love seems to run faster from her than her father's clients ran from the truth. I'm a matchmaker. We know things. And one of my personal favorites, that might work in romance novels. I'm not sure it works in real life. I love that. So one of your favorite quotes has to do with Hemingway and rewrites. Do you twist what you initially write, or do they come through the rewrite? These great lines.
The majority of the rewrites come through the majority of the lines come through the rewrites. Every once in a while, they'll come, but usually if a line like that comes to me, it's really, I've been writing this book for a long time, so I'm really into it. So very rarely comes on a first draft, if ever. It's usually comes long in the process where I know the characters and I'm really deep into it. So it's always in the rewrite. Again, I could go back through my notes and I'll bet you a pound of chocolate that wasn't the first draft. So.
There's hope. There's hope.
in just the way Murphy's Law was. I mean, it just because I always kind of bounce around with names of characters' names, and sometimes they don't work, and I have to change them. Mid in the mid edit stage. So that's kind of cool. So they just might not fit, or they just are not working. So there we go.
In Christmas Night, your characters Fiona and Liam say that they're proposing to do what's never been done before. These characters are so appealing and adventurous. Would you talk just a little bit about them?
The Liam character?
Liam with Fiona too, because they kind of get together and propose to do this thing. I don't want to spoil it for listeners, what that's never been done before. Right.
And I wanted Liam and Fiona had been around for a while in a few books, and I actually like these characters a lot, and that's one of the reasons I really wanted them in this book. And I actually, when I look at those two characters, they seem to be the most rebellious to me, certainly of the matchmakers. And it's like they always are screaming in my ears, we want a book. It's almost like I want to do a prequel with them. I mean, they're always pushing. Both of them are pushing the boundaries, and I like that when characters do that. I had somebody come to me, and it was after I think the first or second book, and they said, I like Liam. You're not going to kill him off, are you? And I'm going, and I thought, well, no, I don't think so.
Not yet.
It's really, well, and I'm not going to, but I mean, it's really kind of interesting when you're writing a sequel, and this is a series, and this is the longest series I've ever written, is that characters are always surprising you. And when you start out, sometimes you don't know who's going to be the strongest of the characters, and sometimes they just jump out at you. And a lot of that is the story itself, kind of lends itself to bringing these characters out, and sometimes it's the character building that you did when you first created them, and that's always fun to me. It's fun to me when they surprise me. I love that. I really like that a lot. And Liam and Fiona just kept surprising me in this book, and I'm going, really? You're going to do that? Okay, I guess so. So anyway, that was fun.
So Christmas is a very magical time, especially for children, and the children in this book are amazingly happy, and they're constantly giving gifts to Madeline and Colin.
Yes.
Is that why? Because it's a magical time for children? Is that why they're so impish?
Well, it wasn't so much that, is I wanted to show the joy, no matter what century you're in, of children. They just have this unfiltered joy. I think that no matter where they are, who they are. And I really like that about children, that they are just so open and so willing to give you a hug or a smile or giggle, and so it wasn't so much that it was the Christmas season as that just is
children
what I think is magical about children. Yeah, just children in general.
I even like that better.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Beautiful. In your books, go ahead.
We do a lot of traveling because our kids live in Europe, and you go someplace and you could hear kids laughing, and I just love that. I just think that is just very magical. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Beautiful.
Went down a rabbit hole. Yeah.
No. In your books, I get a feeling at times that your characters are pulled along by a force of destiny. Can you talk a little about the role of destiny in your time travel Matchmaker Cafe series?
So they're pulled along, but I also like to see them sometimes railing against it. That it's almost like a current in the water where they're pulled along, but they're trying. Sometimes they fight against it, sometimes they give in, sometimes they fight against it. So that there's push-pull always, much the way it is in life. Where sometimes you think that it's predestined, but you don't want it to be. So that's it's a push-pull for me with how they're, and that's why I think I liked Liam and Fiona, because they had a destiny that they actually railed against for a while, and will still, I think. And then I've got Nessa, which is going to be fun. I think she's screaming for another book. So anyway.
Great.
So are we.
Yes.
Okay. Go. Oh, good.
There are many treatments of the Legends of King Arthur. What tales did you draw upon to create the story elements for A Christmas Night?
So I will say to you, The Mists of Avalon. That, I don't know if anyone's ever read that book, The Mists of Avalon.
Yep.
But I love that book so much. And the thing that was when I was researching for this book, and then because when I write, I always am searching for a time in history that I want to kind of ground the story. Uh-huh. And when I found King Arthur, that was it for me. I was like, oh my God, that's it. And with King Arthur, the more research I did, there's been so many tellings and mistellings, and Mallory he kind of put together a whole bunch of different stories that he'd heard and then put his own spin on it because he was an author. And so the Legends of King Arthur are great for authors like us because there's so much discrepancy. I mean, we really don't know what really happened. We can piece things together, but we don't. I mean, we think Merlin was a wizard, but how magical was he? Did King Arthur end up in the Mists of Avalon, or is he buried someplace in England? So I just love that ambiguity that there's, and that everybody recognizes King Arthur, Guinevere, and Lancelot, but there's all these fun stories simmering and blowing around them that you can kind of add to it and flesh out. So I just love that. Yeah, and I may want to write another King Arthur story because I just think it's very fun.
So Pam, would you ever want to time travel yourself? And if yes, would you go forward or backward in time to when?
That's a great question. And yes, I would definitely, if I could do that, I would definitely do that. And I'm not really interested in going forward in time. I am interested in going back in time, and there's really no time. I mean, I always want to be able to come back.
Yes.
And there's some times that are more dangerous than others. But I think the experience would be just so much fun. And so there's really not a time period that I wouldn't want to go. I think it all is kind of fascinating to me. I'm such a geek about history that it's all great. So, I'm less interested in the future, because I'm thinking we're still developing that. So it's like I might go to another planet, but that might be.
I hear another book.
I know.
Speaking of books, Pam, would you treat us and our listeners to a reading from your new book, A Christmas Night?
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I think I'll start at the beginning.
That's an
This
awesome
is a
place
prologue.
to start.
Awesome. It's 1485, Tintagel Castle, England. And just for, this is not in the book, but it will be eventually, but just for the listeners, Tintagel Castle was actually thought to have been where King Arthur was born. And in the midst of Avalon, that's very apparent. But this Tintagel Castle is a ruin right now, but at one time was pretty awesome. So Tintagel Castle, Colin Edward Penrose bounded down the stairs 2 at a time. He left his father's chamber in the same way he entered, at a dead run. He needed air. At the bottom of the stairs, the hum of voices rose to greet him. His father had invited over half of Glastonbury, members of the clergy, and the surrounding villages to participate in the 12th night Christmas celebrations. The great hall overflowed with guests, eating his father's food and drinking his wine. Colin was not in a festive mood. His father had given him ultimatums before, and he had learned the hard way they were not hollow threats. Colin reached the double doors that led outside, but Douglas Channing blocked his path. Sturdy and a head shorter than Colin, Douglas was fair, while Colin was dark. They were the same age and had been best friends since the day Douglas had been foster to Lord Penrose. "What did your father say?" Douglas said. "My father demands I wed, or he will declare Henry his heir." Douglas sucked in his breath. "Your father sounds serious this time." Colin nodded. "He is not the man he once was." During the page.
Wow.
He had lost the spark in his eye, as though he is letting go of this world and longs for the next one, the world where he will see my mother again. Douglas put his hand on Colin's shoulder. "Then you must give him a reason to live. The most important thing to your father is his family. Marry and give him a grandchild. You know that is not possible. No woman will marry a Penrose heir." Colin rolled his shoulders and glanced toward the great hall. He said there was a visiting matchmaker attending the celebrations. Douglas nodded. "That would be Nessa from the Romani camp. I heard she's the same person who found a match for your father. A matchmaker will make you believe in love. I would settle for a wife." So that is the opening of the story.
And I have goosebumps all over again.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I remember reading it and feeling goosebumps, and then I knew I was about to step through a very magical door before I stepped into the Great Hall to meet Nessa, and I was right. So thank you so much for the reading, and thank you for joining us, Wendy.
Yes. Thank you so much, Pam, for joining us for a novel talk. This has just been great, a real treat.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
New book, Christmas Night, is available November 6th and is highly recommended, as is the whole series. Before we say goodbye, I wanted to encourage our listeners again to visit your beautiful website at pambinder.com. It's got all kinds of wonderful and inspiring information, a great view of all your books, and also information on your speaking engagements. Listeners will also want to sign up for your fun newsletter. Definitely urge you to do that. And a thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and keep reading, because a novel read leads to a novel talk.